What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the True Church of Jesus Christ with his latter-day saint in time and space, in the flesh, begging the Lord, when and who, asking and seeking and knocking, begging and begging. Take me away from this flesh and praising those that have been filling them up on a daily basis with more stool and urine. That's all we got to look forward to in life is providence. The two major problems of human existence is health and money. Get me out of here. But either way, while we're here, we're going through some trials and tribulations. No human being has ever walked out of life without a few scars in between, unless you're just locked away in a monastery or somewhere. But the Lord didn't lock me anywhere. He locked me right here in time and space. And not only that, but not in the Hamptons either. So he goes outside and he sees the miseries of the world. I'm not a white person that has money and any of that stuff. The Lord gave me scriptures. And these are for the people that are downtrodden, that might be going through things in life too. Because a lot of people, I realized, are not going through problems in life. All they are is just a little bit miserable because they're unintelligible ways of living. But if people are going through, the severe trials and tribulations in life, God's not full of just good Bible quotes. God also teaches you as well of why you're suffering, what you're going through, and who you're suffering for. So there's a lot of scripture about the sufferings of Christ. It's not just about, fine and dandy gravy where God is love. Oh yeah, he is. But at the same time, you got to pay the price for that love. So we'll go to that price a little bit here too in 1 John chapter 2 verse 15. Have no love for the world, nor the things that the world affords. So that's another thing about the Master's mission, cutting the knots of material consciousness. If anyone loves the world, the Father's love has no place in him. For nothing that the world affords comes from the Father. So that's what I'm trying to say too. Nothing that like John Jones, that's a perfect example. 1 John Chapter 2, verse 16, nothing that the world affords comes from God. So what I was trying to say before about the mortals think that they have their God in like a world championship belt. Well, is Scripture a liar? Nothing from this world comes from God. Like, families. The only things I'm saying are all what we get taught by our spiritual teacher. I know the teaching might sound really strange, because God's not properly taught in the world. Oh yeah, God's my this and God's my that. You can't make any associations with God to begin with. And this scripture says nothing that the world affords comes from the law from God. So God, what does God give? God gives his immortal, eternal spirit presence revealed to you, and now you live under his spirit, which takes you out of this world. That's the Master's mission. Also, verse 16 of John 2. Carnal allurements, enticements of the eye, so like women, money, excitement, like video games, movies, enticements of the eye. That's why I gave up a lot of those things, because those were alluring to my eyes for too long. So, the life of this empty show. Yeah. Mr. Yamamoto in his book of the Samurai, The Way of the Samurai. The Buddhists were taught Zen. They know the marionette show of this life. See, all of the teachings of the world are in the Bible. Why did John say that? The enticements of the eye and the life of empty show. Is John a Buddhist? No, we're all taught by the one God. It doesn't matter if he's Chinese or a friggin' Hebrew. We're all taught Zen, the marionette show of this world. These are all from the world. So verse 16 of 1 John chapter 2 should be studied by every person on earth, because that is the rendition for Zen Buddhism. That's exactly Zen Buddhism in one phrase. And the world with its seductions is passing away. Verse 17. But the man who does God's will endures. So these are the trials, enduring. All right, that's a very important one. I'm going to keep preaching 1 John verse 2 for a while. Remember, it's all about spiritual enlightenment as well, too. So where did I see this? Well, we'll go to John 16, verse 23. Oh, sorry, 33. I tell you all this, that in me you may find peace. So that's what going through the misery is, going through the trials. Remember, God said that the ways to his kingdom, right? This world's full of evil, misery, troubles, great tribulations. So instead of getting peace from the allurements of the eye, women, booze, drugs, money, nope. You have to come to spiritual consciousness. Come to the temple within your own being. That's where the great Spirit of God is. That's what Brother Paul says. Do you not know that you are the temple of the living God, and the Spirit of God dwells within you? That's what 2 Corinthians is. 2 Corinthians 13, verse 5. Test yourselves to live in the faith. Examine yourselves. Don't you realize that Jesus Christ is within you? Unless, of course, you're reprobates. You're just taking Ricky's advice too much and committing crimes and doing whatever you want to do. See, that's man's way, doing whatever he wants to do. Just gets hypnotized by the flesh and the form, the marionette show, the emptiness of this world. He'd still see Ricky's not a good example of being a Zen Buddhist, but that's what happens when you just keep going on with the things of this world. You're never going to have the peace, and that's what it is. So I tell you this, that in me you may find peace. You will suffer in the world. That's what it says. John 16, verse 33. You will suffer in this world. So take courage. I have overcome the world. So by his Spirit, we overcome our sufferings in life, and there's no other way. Or else you're in the fire of suffering. That's what it's not the wrath, it's kind of like the wrath of God, let's say. So about this Satan fellow, too, before we cut the knots of material consciousness, of the Master's mission on earth is not to spread peace, but the sword, to cut the knots of material consciousness from you in this world. Well, the breath of this world is known as Satan, as the Master says, the prince of this world. The Bhagavad Gita says that the breath of this world circulates into the 9 gates. So the 2 holes of the nose, the ears, the eyes, and the mouth. That's 5, right? But there's a couple more of them down there. Anyways, the 9 gates gets flooded by the life air, quote unquote life air. So that life air is Satan. And what that means is once one has the life air in their consciousness, all of a sudden the pictures of this world, matter, will appear to one in their own individual consciousness. And that was the mystery too when I read the book 1 and 2 of Adam and Eve. Satan kept appearing to Adam as different forms in the world. But again, Satan is a transcendental figure himself. So what that means is Satan appears in their mind as the pictures. And the pictures seem real to them out in the world. So when Satan came to Adam and he appeared real as like a man, and Satan said like, oh, why don't you come over to my village and, just do our way. We got lots of girls over there. You could fornicate with them and have a good old time with us. See, all those were suggestions to his self, to Adam, to his sense of I, me, and mine, and the flesh now inside his head. So Satan is that flesh, basically the idea that you get in the pictures of your own mind, of your own bodily concept. That's Satan appearing to oneself in everyone's individual consciousness that does not have the light. So Lucifer is known as the morning star. I know the myth behind that now. What the morning star is, just like how the sun comes up, and now like basically our life is guided by this morning star that travels in the sky. So like the sun now makes its course across the sky, and all of our events in time and space are followed by the sun. So it doesn't matter that you go to work. You only go to work because you have to go to work at 8 o'clock in the morning. Oh, now your day, see, everyone doesn't realize that their day is guided by the star. Even though you might have events, yeah, that's all taking place because it's in the light of day. Now that basically means the morning star, how one is guided. So that's the ego of man. Lucifer was given a task by God to guide man's ego See, the pictures that he creates into God's spiritual kingdom. Or you could say into spirit behind matter. So let's talk about the early clairvoyants, like the Irish. Or that's a race now that people kind of know because they were branded by the Catholics as just heathens. Well, why are they branded like heathens? It's because they had spiritual consciousness. And Catholics are ignorant anyways. They didn't understand nothing. So these people can see behind matter, and its constitutional form is spirit. So that's why they were communing with nature spirits, or they had like knowledge of spiritual beings. Spiritual beings make up matter. And that's what God gave Lucifer the task, was to guide man into the knowledge of the spirit behind matter. And Lucifer didn't want that. Oh no, he was like, I see, this is more about the lore of what went on in heaven. And he didn't like that, especially when after God created man. And Lucifer didn't like this man. You see, Lucifer was like, why should I bow down? When God made man, God called all the angels in creation to worship his creation, his Adam. Except for Satan, he didn't want to. Now, why didn't Satan want to worship Adam? Because Adam was made out of all of the elements of creation: earth, air, fire, and water, and the spirit. So Satan was like, I'm not going to bow down to him because he's inferior to me. He has all these lesser elements. I'm a being of spirit and fire. So what is this fire? That's also a very spiritual thing. It's spiritual fire. It's not like heat and the burning of this world. So fire is something different in a spiritual context. So all of God's angels, you could say, are made from fire. And this spirit now, Lucifer, was given a task because God created Lucifer in almost God's exact equal. Lucifer was like almost God's equal. He's not God's equal because nothing can equal God. Or else that's basically the inconceivable. He doesn't share himself. He's always self-sufficient, God. God doesn't share anything. God creates. And God created Lucifer in almost his duplicate. So that's what Lucifer really is kind of like God's duplicate. And he was given a task by God as being this morning star. So just like the sun guides the course of our events here on earth, our ego and the mental pictures that we receive in our minds was supposed to be guided by the spiritual being known as Lucifer into the will of God. And the will of God was to make matter and spirit one. So the total functions of how this, like basically clairvoyance, like seeing spiritual beings that comprise matter. So water spirits, air spirits, earth spirits, and fire spirits. All those exist, but in man's consciousness now, he can't see the spiritual world. Because Lucifer he didn't want to do God's plan and will. He wanted to do his own will. So he's the morning star. He's the ego, or you could say the intelligence of this world. That's why it's known as the false ego and the contaminated intelligence of good and evil. So that's all Satan is the person that doesn't have enlightenment. This morning star guides everybody. It guides humanity now into things of this world. So basically, like you could say, people's dreams. Everyone's quote unquote got a dream of what they want to accomplish in this world, and that's Satan. It has nothing to do with God. Because as it says here in John 2, the things of this world have nothing to do with God. Satan leads one. Lucifer, he still has that task. God didn't change creation because Lucifer basically was disobedient to God. God still gave Lucifer that task of guiding humanity's consciousness. And now, the reason why humanity goes to hell is because of that disobedience of Adam. Adam, instead of worshiping the Lord, consulting with the Lord, consulted with Eve, and Eve consulted with Satan. And that's the fall of man. So that's one of the principles why of suffering exists, is because man follows quote unquote Satan. And what Satan is just the fleshly concoction of his own being. So that's what the morning star is. Just like the sun guides the earth, so too does a spiritual being known as Lucifer, Satan, guides humanity's mind in this world. So that's why in this world, man are evil, because they want to control. The goal of man was just to control this earth, and he's did it. That's basically the morning star, Lucifer. Now, when one is reborn in the spirit, Christ says in Revelations, he's the morning star. So this is like Revelations chapter 2. So Revelations chapter 2, verse 28. I will give him the morning star. So what is this morning star? I will give him the morning star. That's basically now you being guided in spiritual intelligence now. I will give you the morning star, because Satan, Lucifer, without being reborn, as the Master says, by the waters of God, the human being is in darkness. And not only that, he is, quote unquote, Satan himself, because Satan's been given the task to guide humanity's ego. And how is humanity guided? All through in their mind and through pictures of good and evil in their consciousness. That's why Bhagavad Gita says you have to be reborn, a surrendered soul. And note that the contaminated consciousness, one was ruled by the false ego, the shadow of this world, which is basically the sense of their own flesh and their own consciousness. And basically that's personal sense of sense gratification, you see. The mind in this world, in this air, always just goes towards sense gratification. It always wants something to touch, good, something to look at, see good. It always wants this good and evil. Well, it rather would avoid the evil, but that's also what the contaminated consciousness is. It's also in ignorance. So it gravitates even towards ignorance as well, and ignorant things that appear in man's consciousness. So that's also the significance of Satan and how he tempted Adam. He appears as the pictures in one's mind externalized. So Satan's a powerful figure in matter because he appears as matter as well. Not only inside the consciousness, but externalized as matter as well. So that's why they tell you that matter is an illusion. It's not real because it's a product of this morning star, or Lucifer. And Lucifer is disobedient towards God, which is why you have humanity being the way they are, because they don't know that they're being guided by this dark figure, which is the concoction of the flesh. Remember, being reborn means now we're not taking thought. That's why the Master has this particular way, because the flesh always imposes thoughts and feelings on the living entity. And by not taking thought anymore, that's how you overcome the flesh and the fleshly sense of being in one's own individual consciousness. So that's what dissolves the misery as well too. And that's basically overcoming Satan. So that's how one overcomes the personal sense of self and the sense gratification now. Remember, the mind wants just to gratify the sense of the flesh through taste, touching, smelling, seeing. It wants form. So that's all the mind wants, something of this world. So as a male, we're all programmed to have our deficiencies and lack because of the female deficiency. So Satan, you could say, the mental concoctions of the flesh, when one is in their adolescence, will have this sudden emotional upspringing of lust of the flesh. That's when the sexual urges start coming in more fruitive. So if one doesn't know the truth, like for everybody, like I'm saying me, and even at my time when I was 13, 12 years old, all we're getting impulses is of the flesh in your own mind. And it's just sexual desires. So that's all, quote unquote, Satan leading one in more this world now, because God never stopped his plan of him having the morning star. So all that follow him in the morning star, they all go to hell. God made a place for all those that follow Satan, quote unquote, and that place is called hell. So God made a place for all those that follow him, and still the original creation is transcendental kingdom. No one's ever, as it says in the parables, son, you are always with me and all that I have is mine. So in true reality, we've never fell from God. But you won't know that unless you become reborn. It's the process of removing the false ego, darkness. Man is in darkness. He's in material consciousness. And since Adam fell into darkness, Satan is the ruler of this world. It's the flesh and the ideas and the images that appear in one's mind. God is an infinite invisible, a nothingness, as Mr. Miyamoto Musashi put it. So again, if one hasn't been reborn and taken the activity of prayer by not taking thought, they're going to be controlled by the morning star of this world. They're going to be guided by just the fleshly concoction or the fleshly sense of I, me, and mine. And just like Bhagavad Gita says, it's just the life air in this world that circulates in the gates of the body, and the mind is the chariot. See, the living entity is not even in control. It's all just a process of the automatic process of the flesh. The mind taking thought, it takes thought. It imposes itself on the individual. So then it leads the individual like a chariot to doing the things of this world. And who's the ringleader of the chariot? For men, it's a hypnotic sense of a woman. He just has to gratify this sense gratification of his deficiency. So for most guys, it's trying to go out and get a girl. That's all life is about in this world. That's why guys have to have this, that, and the other. Why? To meet the requirements for some woman. That's driving their mind. And they don't know that that's Lucifer. It's all the pictures that come into one's consciousness. That's the revelation of the books 1 and 2 and Adam and Eve. Satan always appeared out in time and space. But again, he is a transcendental being. He's the ego of man. And you have to free yourself from that fleshly form of mind. That's what the Buddha's teaching was, that all suffering, lamentation, sickness, the disease as it's called, is from this ego, is from this mind, this fleshly form of being. And that's not the reality of man. Who told you you're naked? As Jen, the marionette show, it's just an illusion of oneself. It's just an imagination of oneself. Here's Tom with the weather. So if one is caught up within this imagination of self, then it will start making its own reality for people. Now it has to get a relationship. And then in order to support this relationship, it has to go get a job. It has to fulfill now this fleshly sense of being and what it's obtained in the world now. That's why man doesn't have the wisdom, and he always falls out of his things, because it's just the idea of the flesh taking over his mind. It's not his real sense of being. That's what being reborn is, and taking no thought for your life. If one gets things in this world by prayer and meditation, then that's from God. It's not from quote unquote Lucifer or Satan anymore, or one's own personal will. Because that's also the thing too, is the flesh has its own will. Brother Paul says the flesh and the spirit are always at war with each other. So that's another thing about how to what this Satan is, because that Satan figure is huge in the Bible. And what that Satan figure is one's own contaminated consciousness, the fleshly sense of being. And all human beings are led by Satan, because that's the morning star. Just like the sun, the earth is led, and so are our events too, by that light. It's the same thing. The ego and the inner quote unquote morning star is just the pictures of the flesh that one is always confronted with their own mind. So they're being led by the morning star of this world, and that's Lucifer, Satan. So one has to be reborn in the knowledge of God in order to be led by the Spirit of God. As in Revelations, I will give you the morning star. So now you're led by God, the Spirit of God, the grace of God. That's what Brother Paul says about now coming out from under the law and into the grace and truth of God. It's being reborn again. So that reborn process is huge, because you can't identify yourself with the flesh anymore. And that's a process over time. And then God will make itself known to you. That's also the part of your religion. John chapter 1, the light that enlightens all men, is your obligation to get. And that's the ticket back to God's transcendental kingdom. So that's the whole thing about this world, Satan. There's hell because God made hell for all those that believe in the flesh. That's why when I get into scripture, It says that the flesh can't please God. And all the things of the flesh, the things of this world, is not God. Nothing can be God in that sense. So I'll get more into the scriptures. I want to keep this short because this is just a video about Satan. About what Satan is. The idea of Satan is the fact that Satan appears to one's own fleshly sense of being, and it also appears out to them in the world as persons, places, and things. That's why he tricked Adam too. He actually appeared as people. Satan appeared as groups of people. So that's also the illusion. Just like when they're in the desert and they see like water on the sand, well, that's all an illusion. That's how Satan appeared also to Adam. Not only just as one people, but like groups of people. He tried to make circumstances. See, man is all guided by his just illusionary sense of being. And he makes circumstances for people that all just are a concoction of his own mental speculations. So that's what the individual is under the false ego, a concoction of mental speculation. And he has to go around fulfilling what the flesh imposes itself on him. See, that's all the mystery of the Garden of Eden. The flesh was stitched onto man like a garment, like a sweater. The flesh is not supposed to be on man. That's the punishment. The punishment is the flesh, the mind and the body. And then they got kicked out into this world where Satan controls, because that's who their master was now. Since Eve listened to Satan, so did Adam. They didn't listen to God. You get tossed into this world, and Satan was their ruler and controller. That's why in the other books it says the wombs. All of people that are getting judged by the judgment day of the Lord are in the wombs of Hades. They're in the wombs of hell. So that's what I mean about reincarnation. All these people that say if like someone dies and they see their dead relative after a couple weeks, that's because the Bardo, basically the Tibetan Book of the Dead, people have an X amount of time in order to get enlightened. It lasts maybe 2-3 weeks. You're in this limbo of material creation, and then your soul goes to its destination. So yeah, there is people that say that they've seen their dead relatives or whatever, but they're not going to be there for that long. They get into their destination in the afterworld anyways, and usually most people's destination for their ignorance of religion is just tossed into hell. That's what Bhagavad Gita teaches. That's what God teaches. So that's also the teachings of God. As very few people get into heaven. So Matthew chapter 7 verse 13, very few, because they don't know the truth, the straight way. That's why the path is straight and narrow, telling the difference between good and evil, and not basically identifying with the pictures in one's own consciousness anymore. That's mental. You're going to have to pray, discipline. You're going to get taught the ways. So I hope that helped. I want to keep this pretty short, and that's about the morning star and about Lucifer and Satan and what that idea is all about. So I know it might be a little bit complicated, but just remember how the earth is guided like the sun. So too is man's pictures. He's guided by the morning star, Lucifer. And if one's not reborn in the spirit, then the morning star of Jesus Christ. Now, your actions, your thoughts and feelings won't be guided by the spirit. It'll be guided by the flesh, which is Satan. So I hope that's helped out a little bit in God's religion, understanding these terms. I'll talk more. Again, I was going to get into the scriptures, but Satan was first on my mind as well. And overcoming the misery, overcoming the trials and tribulations as well about life. And we'll get more into the scriptures. So thank you guys for tuning in. Take care.